There was a young lady of 18 who was quite determined to join the Mile High Club. I don't know how she met this chap or how she discussed it around they'd agreed to do this, but the cabin crew went and stopped her, and then she sat back down in her seat, and then about half an hour later she was back up with another chap trying to join the Mile High Club again. But then my friend said that she went to speak to her parents because she was actually travelling with her mum and dad. Hi, I'm Mandy Smith, and I was cabin crew with Virgin Atlantic for over 12 years, and I'm here to answer any questions that you might have in the honesty box. Why is the food so bad? So this is a really good question. It's not the food that's bad, it's your taste buds that are different in mid-air. So the pressure of the cabin affects your whole body. Even your taste buds, it affects, you know, all of your gastric anomalies and your brain and everything. So it does affect your taste buds as well. So it's not the food that's bad. If you actually tasted that food on the ground, which is what the chefs do when they're creating the menu, it actually tastes quite salty and quite strong, and that they have to make it stronger flavoured because of the taste bud situation. Ever caught passengers trying to have sex? Well, yes, I have not seen anyone in flagrante full nakedness, because we can take those doors off, you know, even though you've locked it, we can open them and we can take the whole door off. But no, I have stopped people, knocked on the door and just said, you know, excuse me, can you come out, kind of thing, 'cause I kind of know what you're doing. It's worse when you've got children on board and it's in the daytime. But if it's on a night flight and they're being discreet, I probably wouldn't even interrupt them, if I'm honest.
Does it happen often?
Fair play. No, not really. I would say 1 in 20 or 30 flights, not really that often. Now, one of my friends had a situation where there was a young lady of 18 who was quite determined to join the Mile High Club, and she just grabbed anyone. I don't know how she met this chap or how she discussed it around they'd agreed to do this, but the cabin crew went and stopped her, and then she sat back down in her seat, and then about half an hour later she was back up with another chap trying to join the Mile High Club again. But then my friend said that she went to speak to her parents because she was actually travelling with her mum and dad. And she was only 18, bless her, so yeah, she didn't do it again. We should have like condom dispensers in there or something. This is a good one. Should overweight or bigger people have to pay for 2 seats? So actually they do, is the actual rules. But when people are buying things online these days, we can't always see how big someone is. But if you do fill more than 1 seat, you are officially meant to buy 2 seats. I don't know if you're aware, when people sit at the front of an exit row or on a bulkhead, sometimes you have to be able to help someone in an emergency. And if you're overweight, you wouldn't be able to help because these seats are made purposefully skinnier so that you can't fit bigger people in them. So if you're overweight, under 16, elderly passenger or disabled, that kind of thing, you're not allowed to, that's why you're not allowed to sit on those front row seats. Okay, so what is turbulence? I always get asked this one, and I used to sit next to people for takeoff and landing when I was cabin crew, because I'm quite good at explaining what the bumps and scary bits are and all the noises of the landing gear and all the bumps that when you go down the middle of the runway, things like that. So turbulence is just a pocket of hot air in a normal air environment. So you would drop and you'd go back up to the normal pressure, and then you drop in the hot air again. So that's basically what turbulence is. So the pilots can see it on their screen. They know when there's a storm coming, because there's usually another plane ahead of us within the jet streams. Why do you have to have your seat up, window up for takeoff and landing? Okay, so this is a good question. Everybody's always like, why do these things need to happen? So yes, you need to have your window blind up so that the outside situation emulates the inside situation. So if it was brighter in the cabin and you had to go outside, you'd then be dazzled. So if the outside environment emulates the inside environment, then you can see what you're doing in an emergency. And your seat up, right? So your armrests up and your armrests down is the biggie here, because if you had your armrest up, I don't know if anyone's aware of this, but the seats actually fold all the way forward. So that's for your safety, because if you have your armrest down, your seat's quite sturdy. But if you have your armrest up, the person behind you could just trample on you and you'd be stuck in your seat because your seat would fall forward. So yes, put your armrests down and your tray tables are away and your laptops are away. That's for the safety of you getting out, basically. You wouldn't be able to get out if in an emergency situation. There you go. Any situations where you were genuinely worried about a plane's safety? Okay, so the very first emergency situation that I had was when I was a junior. We were flying to Miami and the manager on board said, right, we've got a medical emergency, one of the engines is on fire. So the captain has deemed it necessary to tell the passengers what's actually going on. So normally when there's an emergency or there's a technical issue, we would keep quiet, but because the passengers on the right-hand side could see the flames shooting from the engine, we decided to explain what was going on. So it was an electrical fire within the engine, which I know that sounds really scary, but the more you think about it logically, it's actually not. It's actually the best kind of fire to have, an electrical fire, because you need 3 sources for any fire triangle. I don't know if you're aware. So we've got oxygen, fuel and heat. So as soon as you take any one of those 3 away, you no longer have a fire. So as soon as we switch the electric off, an electric and fire can be contained, so it's not a big deal. But yeah, that was pretty scary afterwards when I'd thought about it, but at the time it didn't seem as bad because I knew the procedures to take place, so it wasn't too bad. Have passengers ever groped or touched you? Yes, unfortunately. It tends to happen more when you're younger or newer and working down the back in economy. But yes, when it happened to me, I would just grab people's hands and put it above their head and say, can you please not touch me? So I would embarrass them, is the best way to deal with it, because you can't really do much else. You can't hit them back or anything like that. You know, it's a professional environment, so you would literally just try to embarrass them out of what they've just done and so they wouldn't do it again. Can you say air hostess? Okay, so this is a good one. I get asked this question all the time. Air hostess is just a bit of an old-fashioned term from when people were registered nurses. You had to be a registered nurse to be an air hostess, and you had to leave when you were 30. You weren't allowed to be married, and you literally were there to wait on people and be a hostess and entertain men or whoever was on board, usually men. And that's where that term comes from. So it can be deemed as quite a derogatory term, but I'll answer to anything, if I'm honest. Okay, is it true that pilots eat different meals? That is very true. And we're not allowed to serve them over the main console. So you have to serve them to the side, and they both have to eat a different item of food. So if one has the chicken, the other one has to have the fish. So they always decide that between themselves before they tell us what they want. And that's in case either of them has food poisoning. Obviously, we don't want both of them thrown up. Not that our food is ever bad, but you know, it's just a precautionary measure. Okay, how do I get upgraded? Oh my God, if I could tell you how many times I've been asked this, it's hilarious. Dress well and dress for the cabin that you want to be in. And don't have children, because they will never upgrade children. Be polite and be nice. Don't shout at anyone, because negative behaviour is not rewarded. They would never put a child in upper class or in premium economy, because then the children usually disturb the other passengers. So that's why you would never get upgraded with children. And if there were any spare seats, they would usually go first to the people on standby. I know that sounds really strange, because you would give free seats to your staff rather than your passengers, but they really like people to pay for what they're getting. So they try not to upgrade people for free if they can. Sorry. Have you ever had to deal with a violent passenger? Oh, Yes, many, many violent passengers. I remember one particular one. We were coming back from Barbados and we'd noticed that there was a bit of a ruckus in the airport and didn't really think much of it, just thought it was someone kicking off, like passengers not happy about something or whatever. And then when we got on board the plane, it happened again, but with the same gentleman. And I was a junior at the time, I think, so I was on the cart opposite another girl, and I saw something out the corner of my eye. And as I looked over, nothing was going on. So I just carried on serving the person that I was serving. And then I saw this man grabbed this lady's hair in front of him, started ramming her head off the seat. And she just sat there and she didn't know what to do, bless her, and she just like looking at me. And I said, would you mind coming over and have a word with me and explain what's going on? So I told the lady to stay where she was because she was clearly distressed. And this man, bless him, I do not know what was wrong with him. And he clearly had some issues. And he was so violent. So once we got him to the galley, he basically started shouting and screaming. And my then manager came in, the FSM, she said, stop doing that. And he went to bite her finger. He was so aggressive. He literally was just clawing like an animal, biting and clawing at everyone. We had to pin him down. We have a few special words, I won't reveal them. But once somebody says these words, everyone kicks into action and we were all on him. And that was it, he was pinned. Pressure points. They do teach you these pressure points to keep people in place. And he did not care that he had those pressure points on him. He was flailing and kicking around. So we tied his hands behind his back and we put him in the seat that was opposite the jump seat so that we could keep an eye on him, and we had to tie him into the chair. And I was actually holding his forehead, but because he had a bald head, my hands kept slipping off. He was nearly biting my manager. It was horrific. He was very violent. And because it was ongoing for the whole 8-hour flight, the cabin crew were getting exhausted having to deal with him. So we were having to do shifts of looking after him and holding him down. And then all the girls went giddy because all the big hunky policemen came in with their dogs and as we were landing. And, oh, no, just doing my makeup again. As we handed over all our police reports, you know. But yeah, bless him. I think there was something mentally wrong with that gentleman. I'm not sure he was all right there. Bless him. Right, is airplane mode really necessary? I'm guessing you're meaning on your iPads and laptops and mobile phones. If you're aware that the airplane mode needs to be on, please do so, because this is to prevent us losing the signal from a beacon. So radio beacons, say a radio beacon would be there and you're coming into land or taking off, and that would signify as to where the ground is and the ground level. So that would actually, the aircraft's following that beacon and it would come in. So any other radio signals such as mobile phones and even Furbies, they used to ban Furbies back in the day, are not allowed because they could interfere with that signal. Okay, what happens if somebody dies on board? This has not happened to me, thankfully. It has happened to a friend of mine where they've had a passenger pass away on the flight. Now, we used to have to put passengers in the bathrooms and then lock the bathrooms off, but because they would be seated on the toilet as they're sat there, if rigor mortis set in, then they would be then stuck in that position and they wouldn't be able to fit in their coffin. So unfortunately now we have to lay them across the front of the seats and put blankets over there and try and calm their loved ones down and try and treat them with respect and cover them with blankets and maybe cordon the area off with blankets tucked into the overheads, which is what I would probably do. If they passed away on board, it's the law that we as cabin crew have to keep going. So we have to keep doing any kind of resuscitation until they're deemed to be deceased. So if it was an accident that happened on board, we would, or if they had a heart attack, we would then just keep going, doing CPR. But if it was someone who passed away from natural causes or another kind of ailment, then obviously we wouldn't need to do anything to them then. But yeah, we'd need to contact the ground services to be met by an ambulance or the coroner, depending on which, and we wouldn't really do it as an emergency landing. We'd just treat it as a normal landing if that person's definitely passed away. Okay, we have another one. How many crashes have survivors? I would say most of them these days have survivors. A lot of the pilots have so much training that they can even land without engines these days. And you fly gliders, you fly little airplanes, you fly all kinds, and you have to have so many hundreds of flying hours before you even get your pilot's license. So they're very, very well trained. And, the crashes are, I think there was a crash the week with Japan Airlines, wasn't there? And that was, everyone got out, and the cabin crew were amazing. And they got absolutely everyone out, and there was nothing left of the airplane once they'd finished. It was incinerated, but everybody got out and it was fine.
Is there like a best or worst place to sit on the plane if there's going to be a crash?
The best place to sit on the plane would be at the 3 doors, so it's the middle of the plane. So I would sit, especially if you don't like turbulence too, definitely sit in the middle because you've got the wings to stabilise you and that type of thing. Yeah, I always sit my mum in the middle because she hates turbulence. Are you trained to deal with serious situations, i.e. hijacking? Yes, we are. We have so much training. As cabin crew, we have survival training. We're trained by ex-SAS in security and safety procedures. We have all kinds of training. We have AvMed, which is aviation medicine, and that's different to medicine when you're on the ground because obviously the pressure affects your body differently. We are trained to deal with all kinds of serious situations. And the hijacking one, it's changed recently, obviously, after 9/11, or not so recently. Most of our procedures used to say, sit in your seat, don't do this, don't say that, don't attack anyone, or don't stop them from doing what they're doing. Now we don't say that, we say stop them, rugby tackle them, get the passengers involved, but we have our signals for that and he would know what's happening, so we would then ask for help from passengers or whoever. But we do have 22 cabin crew on board and they're very effective when they need to be.
Rugby tackle, yeah.
Moving on. Most annoying or ignorant habits of the passengers. Because we travel to so many very different countries, there are a lot of different cultures and religions. So if you've got somebody at the back of the cabin who is got a prayer mat out and they're trying to pray, or anything like that, then please don't disturb them because they're going to have to start the whole thing again. Things like that, but also it's just working with humans. Unfortunately, you are not always going to meet nice humans. But I would say 99% of people are nice, so that's good. But it's that 1% that tend to be, people could be racist or whatever. I've had the similar situation myself where I've had somebody sat next to somebody of a different colour that they didn't want to be sat next to, so they would kick off and expect to be upgraded. So as a manager, I went over there at the time and just said, I'm sorry, we don't accept any kind of racism. We have zero tolerance policies here at Virgin. So I would like to upgrade the other gentleman now. And you can stay there. Have another one. How many female pilots are there? So I would say not enough. There are quite a few at Virgin, and I know that there's a lot more in the Middle East now than there ever was. I think they're allowed to be female pilots out there now, which is great. But there's not many. I'd say a handful, and you wouldn't believe the derogatory comments we get when people realise that there's a woman flying the plane. It's really misogynistic, mostly by the passengers. I mean, the guys are usually scared of the female pilots. So I'm talking about the guys who's like the other pilots, the male pilots, usually scared of the female pilots because they've had to fight their way to the top, so they're usually quite hard-nosed. Can planes actually land on the ocean? So we would call that a ditching. If the plane ditched, it would land into the ocean, and I believe this has happened on a couple of occasions. One occasion, all of the passengers survived, which is quite rare, because if you think how temperamental and how I mean, just the elements are keeping you in the air and keeping the aircraft together. Because the fuselage is so delicate, you know, it's literally sheet metal. That people don't tend to survive from a ditching, but this particular one they did. Then they all got eaten by sharks, if I'm right on that one. I think that was in the Caribbean, so people don't tend to survive when you land on
They all
water.
got eaten by sharks.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not a good scenario. But this way, I think most airlines have stopped putting the life rafts. You know, the LR. Well, you won't know what an LR 32 is, but these pyramid style life rafts that people can climb into, and they're actually really good for places like the Atlantic where it's quite choppy. Because those rafts that we have on that are just the slides are not going to save anyone, I'm afraid. Are you just a glorified waiter? Yeah. So there's nothing wrong with being a waiter. I waited tables for many, many years at uni and after to get a lot of experience to become cabin crew. But I wouldn't say it was glorified. I mean, I certainly wouldn't hand a waiter or waitress at a restaurant a dirty nappy or a bag of sick, which people find as acceptable behaviour for cabin crew. So I'm assuming people know that we're there to do more than just wait on them with their drinks and their food. Otherwise, I think the airlines would probably just put some, vending machines at the back of the plane, because it would be a lot cheaper than having cabin crew on board. So the cabin crew are actually there for your safety, and they're there to look after you, yes, but they're there for medical emergencies, for survival. We've had survival training drilled into us every year we're there. We have to get very high marks to even stay and keep our jobs. So they're very well trained.
So farts in space, basically in weightlessness, hot air doesn't rise. So the good thing is you probably won't smell your own fart, because by the time you've done it, it's already been taken away by the air conditioning system.